sir.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. I'm going to jump right out at it. We're just going to roll, but I got a bunch of questions I want to throw at you tonight. We start thinking about the Bible, of course, because this is a church. Abraham, livestock and goods. Boaz, wealthy landowner. We start looking at Abraham. We start looking at Job, livestock, a man of influence. Lydia, a successful businesswoman. She sold purple cloth. Zacchaeus, who was a wealthy tax collector. To me, these are all biblical models of what you have exemplified with ministry and the marketplace. But of course, there are others in our time that we may not know a lot of. Some of us do. Dr. Bill Winston, Bishop Otis Lockett Sr., Dr. A.R. Bernard, Bishop Arthur Brazier, Bishop Brunner, and so many, many, many more that have created a model through the ministry and marketplace. But particularly you, how were you able to identify what was inside of you and what deserved a business model wrapped around it? The reason why I say that is because you also cook, but you haven't put a business model around it.
Well, it's a very difficult decision to make. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Can you all hear me? I'm stuck. I can't get past Abraham. And you talked about livestock, and you talked about sheep and goats and all of that, and that being a business model, of which it was, because they bartered. That was in exchange for items. They bartered for it. But I would have phrased it this way. Abraham was in real estate because God said, all of this land will I give you.
Yes, sir.
Now, the sheep and the goats and all the other things were what he did with what God gave him.
Yes,
okay?
sir.
So the question comes down to, what do you do with God, with what God has given you? So the first thing you have to know is that you've been gifted. But there are levels of gifts, okay? Like you mentioned me cooking. When I was young, I thought I would open up a restaurant. As I got older and matured, I realized that I didn't like cooking well enough to do it every day, okay? I studied the business model and found out running a restaurant is not about cooking. You can hire somebody to cook. See, a lot of times we get our talent mixed up with our business. So the fact that you can cook doesn't necessarily mean you ought to open up a restaurant, because the restaurant is a business. And at the end of the day, the person who owns the restaurant is not in the kitchen. They hired somebody to cook. They're running the business. And I think sometimes we've confused talent with business. And we think that because we have a talent in a certain area, that we should go into business. And we end up working our talent, and we call ourselves entrepreneurs, but all we really did was create a job. Wow. There's a difference between creating a job for yourself and creating a business. Second thing is, you have to know yourself. It takes a long time to know yourself, to really know yourself, to really know what's in you. To get over the feeling of imposter syndrome takes a long time, and comes back again at different stages in your life, because you don't always identify yourself as being as gifted as other people think you are. Because if you are gifted, it is normal to you. So sometimes other people define you as gifted, and you're just being what you normally are. And then you go home and wrestle with the unbelief of not believing what they said, because what they're calling gifted is your normal. So somebody who's gifted to play the piano, they're gifted to be able to do it. They studied, they rehearsed, whatever, they're gifted to be able to do it, but it's not as big a deal to the one who's playing as the one who's listening, because it's organic to who they are. So knowing yourself and letting it develop in you, when you think of people like Bloomberg, who failed at 39 and then went into business at 40, don't expect to know yourself at 20. You're not through developing yet. Your brain isn't even through developing yet. Then you don't have a collection of life experiences that lead you into the fullness of who you are yet. So a lot of times we are in such a rush because of technology and watching everybody post what they're doing that we end up with a long grocery list of things we do. And when your grocery list is wider than your income, you have a problem because you don't have focus. You're doing 10 things poorly rather than picking out 2 things well. Some of the things you have on that list are your interests, but they're not your business. And to find out what is sustainable financially is important enough. I tell people, build your business around somebody's problem and you'll always have a customer. Listen, in the back as the lady was talking about nurses. That's building a business around a problem. Because of whether you're a black nurse, a white nurse, a brown nurse, a young nurse, or old nurse, there's a deficit in the hospitals for nurses. So that becomes a good breeding ground where there is a need. Then there were other people who talked about things that were really noble things to do, but not necessarily profitable. So you might either open up a not-for-profit, a 501c3, a not-for-profit, and get grant capital to start that business where you can do it. That's fine, but you're at the mercy of the grant in order to maintain the business. And you have to understand, nobility doesn't take away from the need for capital. Just because it's a good thing to do doesn't mean you don't need money to do it. So if you're going to build shelters, you're still going to need money. And so you have to think like a business. I was talking to the president of the hospital, and I was trying to do a health fair during MegaFest one year. And he says to me, we wouldn't be interested in doing a health fair at MegaFest because of the amount of out-of-town people come in. We don't get enough business from doing a health fair. And for a minute, I sat back in the seat and I thought, oh, you don't see it as a service. He saw it as a business. So if he invests into a health fair, he wants it to be a local clientele that ultimately come to the hospital. So he has made a business out of your sickness. And you see it as a service, which it is, but he sees it as a business because he's got a payroll and he's got a building to pay for and he's got insurance to provide and he has expenses that he has to think like a businessman while he hires doctors and nurses.
I want to jump in because I know interviewing you, you're going to give us some 12-minute answers, which are the greatest. But I won't get these questions out of you like you did in that ILS.
Okay.
Successful entrepreneurs should have an ecosystem. I've heard that term a lot since I've been here with you. Mm-hmm. What are the core fundamentals of building an ecosystem around what you do?
What do you read? What do you watch? Who do you hang around? Who are your friends? Birds, the old saying, the birds of a feather flock together. Finding people to flock with that challenge you. And initially, finding people to flock with that you don't feel like you fit with. Because if you stay with the people who you fit with, you don't grow to the people, to the person you believed you could be. So even if you come in at the ground level, even if you come in driving them around, even if you come in providing some sort of service, to get in that ecosystem where things, let me skip that, let me go to the Bible. The first thing Jesus does is pick out 12 disciples and then starts his ministry. He put himself in an ecosystem and none of them are rabbis. We pick out people who compete with us, not complete us. So Jesus picks out a tax collector, he picks out a fisherman who's a businessman, he picks out all of Luke, a physician, he picks out all of these different types of people and starts his ministry and says, if you follow me, I will make you fishers of men. He doesn't get men that are already fishers of men. He gets men that he can